Hi, this is Phil Parker at NIAC, and this is the first of a series of podcasts on developing your ideas. Your writing ideas, that is. Ideas for the screen primarily. But in fact, the things we're going to talk about in these first podcasts apply to novels and everything else that I've ever worked on. Initially, what I want to do is just outline the key areas of where you could get your ideas from, what makes a good idea, and how you'd work an idea up so you could tell it to someone else and they'd understand what the idea was. So these things are often referred to as the premise. And I want to start with a discussion about the premise, but before we get there, I want to start with what is an idea, and what's an original idea, and what makes a good idea. You'll read many things about this, and you'll hear lots of things in interviews, and there'll be podcasts and people talking all over the world about what makes a good idea. In essence, no one really knows. But there are a few factors that go into what makes an idea stand out from the rest, and that tends to be what makes people think it's original. First off, it's the fact that there's something in there that you've not heard before, something that actually people think, actually, that intrigues me. Something that makes them think, I'd want to know a bit more about that, rather than just, I've heard that before, or sounds the same as that one, or the other thing. And that's the trick of this, really. It's actually finding that unique thing that makes people want to take the next step, go beyond the idea, to read perhaps an outline you've written, a few scenes you've tried out, or in fact the first chapter of a novel, or the first draft of a stage play. So from this point on, we're really going to be looking at what actually shapes your idea, what makes it original, and also where do those ideas come from, and how do you find out for yourself something that's unique and fresh. And in that sense, being aware of the world around you is probably the most critical thing any writer can ever be, because actually you're always going to be compared with what's going on around you, and in many ways having a sense of where your particular medium is at the moment, like what crime novels have been most successful recently if you want to write a crime novel, or if you want to do a one-act stage play, what are the most successful ones that have been done on the Fringe in the last few years, what have they been about, why do people rate them so highly. And if you want to do a screenplay or a short film, go on YouTube, go on the BBC Network web, and actually look at what people are doing and what's winning awards, so that you have some sense of the things that you're actually up against, the things that matter to people at the moment, and the things that are drawing people's attention, standing out from the crowd. Because only when you've looked at all this material, or read it, or been to see it, will you have a real sense of where your ideas might sit, and what would make them stand out. One of the big bête noirs of many editors and producers and people who have to put up money is they get given proposals that are just like the other 5 that are sitting on their desk, and there's nothing that makes that idea stand out. At the other end of the spectrum, there are people who can pitch you a great idea. It sounds fantastic in a 30-second spiel, but actually when it comes down to writing it up, they couldn't write their way out of a paper bag. So don't ever believe that just having a great idea is the way to success. It's a beginning, and that's the point about ideas, really. They're the beginning. They're not the end. The end is when you do the finished thing, and the beginning, that's just an idea. So, how do you write up an idea? What's this premise thing you'll hear people talk about, or the pitch, or the log line, or the summary of the thing that you want to talk to people about? What should that contain? How is that put together? And why do people focus on it so much? Well, what it contains, I'll come on to in a moment, but let's look at why these short statements have become so useful in modern society, and why people talk about them all the time in books and lectures. And when you go to industrial festivals, people are saying, well, give us your idea, pitch me your project. And they expect you in a flash to just stand there and say the thing in a perfectly rounded, formed way that explains the essence of something you might have worked on for 15 years. Or, in fact, of course, you might have only just thought it up as you were on the tube coming into the meeting. Both sources and time frames have been successful pitch bases. So let's go back to what is it and what makes this important to people. Well, the simple answer is this. Most of the people you're ever going to talk to about your idea need to talk to somebody else about it before they can actually write you a check, invite you in for a meeting, or get excited to read the next bit of the project that you've written up. And they need that shorthand way of sifting through those thousands of projects that come across their desk. You have to remember, in the modern world, we're no longer in the era when people wrote things down by hand and very few people could write. We're in the era of handheld camcorders and digimics and being able to upload things on YouTube when you're 7 years old. This is an era when everyone is making stories, when everyone is trying out their ideas, and everyone is finding some way to express it somewhere on a digital format. So therefore, if you're actually going to people and saying, well, I want you to give me some money, or I want you to appear in this, or I want you to stage this, or I want you to publish this, people initially have to have some way of sorting your idea out from everybody else's. And this is where the premise, the pitch, the log line, all these shorthand terms for a few sentences that sum up your nice, new, bright, shiny idea and make it something concrete, something that people can assess and go, I like that, or at least I like the sound of it, and I may like what follows. But like I said a moment ago, don't ever think that coming up with a great pitch is actually the end of the problem. You may be able to get to the next stage, but if you can't deliver, then ultimately that will be the end of the story. So let's go back to what's in that premise, that thing, those 2 sentences that set you out on a journey and hopefully intrigue someone you're talking to or someone you've written to read on. Where do we start? Well, many people would say you'd start with character. And who are they, and what do they want, and where are they going, and what is their journey. In that sense, it's sort of easy. One can always talk about a character and their journey. The problem is, once you start simplifying a journey down to its bare bones, it sounds like so many other stories. 2 people fall in love, big deal. Someone makes an epic journey to acquire something. We've been there 1,000 times before. And suddenly your idea can look very boring, because actually, if you boil it down to its skeletons, there are very few new stories. They're in fact just versions of very well-known stories that we actually already know. And that is part of the trick of a great premise, actually bringing something to an already recognizable story.